Her chest tightened before she knew why. A smile curved her lips, polite and practiced, but her body betrayed her. Shoulders stiffened, breath caught high in her throat, palms damp against the fabric of her dress. Across the room someone laughed, and she mirrored it instantly, though her nervous system was already whispering a different story. The truth pulsed in her body long before her mind dared to name it. Grief, unprocessed and lingering, hidden beneath the mask she had been trained to wear. This may hurt, but it's true. Our bodies do not lie the way our words do. A smile can be forced, a sentence rehearsed, but the tremor in the voice, the restless fidgeting of fingers, the sudden flush of heat or wave of cold, these are primal signals, rooted in survival. They are the language of the nervous system, the body's archive of everything endured. And when the body has carried grief too long, it learns to tremble in silence even as the face pretends composure. There is a woman behind every smile like this. She has survived storms invisible to those around her. She has walked into rooms where her laughter was expected, but never asked if she was breaking inside. She has been praised for her strength while no one noticed the nights she curled into herself, trembling until exhaustion swallowed her. The tragedy is not only the grief itself, but the loneliness of performing joy while the body quietly screams. Carl Jung wrote that what we repress does not vanish, it returns, seeking expression in the shadows. For the feminine psyche, grief often hides beneath resilience. The world applauds her capacity to endure, but that endurance costs her something sacred. She becomes split, a smiling face above, a sorrowful body beneath. The child within her still waits for someone to notice the tears behind her practiced grin. But the child learned long ago that to reveal pain was dangerous, so silence became survival. Heavy, isn't it? To realize that resilience, as celebrated as it is, can become a disguise. The nervous system records the ache of abandonment, the loss never spoken, the betrayal she had no words for. It records the heartbreak of mothers who were too overwhelmed to comfort her, of fathers who never returned, of partners who said they loved her while their absence spoke louder. Every unwept tear lingers in the body's memory, waiting for release. Yet beneath this silence is a paradox. The very body that holds the wound also holds the map to healing. The same chest that tightens in anxiety softens when grief is finally named. The same shoulders that freeze in fear can release when touched with gentleness. The same stomach that knots in dread can unknot when she learns to breathe deeply again. What the mind represses, the body remembers, and what the body remembers can, in time, be set free. But freedom requires courage. It means choosing to hear what the body whispers when the world would rather she stay smiling. It means asking, what is the grief beneath this mask? What is the truth my nervous system keeps telling me? Most women do not ask because the answers are heavy. The answers unravel old narratives of I'm fine, and it doesn't matter. The answers strip away the illusion of strength and reveal the raw, unguarded truth of sorrow. Still, sorrow is not the end of the story. Within grief lies a hidden seed of resilience, not the hardened, performative resilience that numbs, but a deeper resilience that blooms from vulnerability. To feel the grief is to acknowledge the depth of her capacity to love. To grieve openly is to declare that her humanity matters more than her mask. The nervous system does not only tell the story of wounds, it also tells the story of resilience, of survival, of the body's refusal to give up even when the soul is weary. What if the pain she hides is not her enemy but her teacher? What if her nervous system, instead of betraying her, is guiding her toward the very path she has long avoided? Each tremor, each skipped heartbeat, each frozen shoulder could be seen not as weakness, but as signals, lanterns leading her back to the places where grief still waits to be honored. The question is whether she dares to listen. And listening is never passive. It is not simply noticing the pain, it is meeting it. It is holding the child within and saying, I see you. It is sitting with the ache instead of running from it. It is breaking the silence, even if the only words she can manage at first are a whisper. "I hurt." These words, spoken aloud or even silently to herself, begin to loosen the grip of repression. They allow the nervous system to release its truth instead of carrying it alone. Perhaps you feel it in your own body as you hear these words. The tightness in your chest, the tension in your jaw, the heaviness in your stomach. These are not accidents, they are echoes. They remind you that your body, too, has been holding truths your smile could not confess. And maybe, just maybe, you are ready to wonder what might happen if you let the body speak. The smile is not the whole truth. The nervous system always tells the story beneath. The question that lingers, trembling and unresolved, is this: when the mask finally slips, will she have the courage to face the grief that rises, and in doing so, discover the resilience that has been waiting all along? The grief that hides beneath the smile rarely arrives with fanfare. It does not always announce itself in tears or collapse. Sometimes it arrives as exhaustion that no amount of sleep can cure. Sometimes it lingers in the restless tapping of fingers, the way the body refuses to relax even when safety is assured. Sometimes it appears in the form of irritability, anger at the smallest inconveniences, or the feeling of being constantly on edge. These are the quiet signatures of a nervous system still living in yesterday's storm. When the body carries unresolved grief, time becomes distorted. The past lives inside the present, shaping every response. A raised voice can awaken the echo of an old argument. A sudden silence can feel like abandonment all over again. The mind insists, "This is different," but the body reacts as if history is repeating itself. And in a way, it is. The nervous system cannot tell the difference between memory and reality when trauma remains unintegrated. This is why she may laugh while her chest constricts, why she may appear confident while her stomach knots in dread, why she may even excel in her career or relationships while secretly battling an invisible heaviness that no achievement can erase. Outwardly, she thrives. Inwardly, her body remains loyal to grief unspoken. The world sees the smile, but the nervous system carries the scar. It is tempting to dismiss these signals, to explain them away with logic. "I'm just stressed. I'm just tired. I'm just overthinking." But the truth is more profound. What she calls stress may be the body remembering abandonment. What she calls tiredness may be the nervous system shutting down in despair. What she calls overthinking may be hypervigilance, the brain's way of scanning for danger because the body still feels unsafe. Carl Jung observed that the shadow, the parts of ourselves we exile, always find a way back into consciousness. If grief is silenced, it will return as anxiety. If sorrow is denied, it will return as fatigue. If pain is ignored, it will return as tension in the muscles, tightness in the throat, or numbness in the heart. The nervous system is relentless in this way. It demands truth, even when the mind resists. But there is another truth woven into this. The very signs of dysregulation are also signs of resilience. The anxiety means the body is still fighting to protect. The fatigue means it is conserving energy for survival. The tension means it is bracing against what once felt unbearable. These are not flaws. They are evidence that she endured. They are the body's testimony that even in sorrow, she refused to collapse completely. Still, survival is not the same as living. To live is to reclaim the body as a place of safety, not just defense. It is to feel joy without suspicion, to rest without guilt, to love without bracing for loss. And this reclamation begins with the courage to notice the body's signals without judgment. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" she can begin to ask, "What happened to me that my body still remembers?" Imagine her sitting in a quiet room, the mask of the smile finally removed. Her breath comes shallow at first, her hands twitch with restlessness. She resists the stillness, as if silence itself might swallow her. Yet if she dares to remain, the truth rises. The tears she once swallowed sting at the edges of her eyes. The grief she buried deep begins to surface. She realizes the tightness in her chest is not random. It is the residue of years spent holding back cries no one wanted to hear. It is in this moment that a subtle shift occurs. She begins to understand that her nervous system is not her enemy. It is her witness. It has been carrying the truth all along, waiting for her to listen. The body that trembles, the heart that races, the shoulders that ache, they are not betraying her. They are pleading with her. See me, hear me, release me. Perhaps you too know what it is like to live with this duality. To wear the smile while your body begs for release. To nod politely in conversations while your chest burns with unspoken sorrow. To say, I'm fine, while every muscle in you knows you are not. If this feels familiar, it is not weakness. It is the nervous system's language, reminding you of the grief that deserves to be honored. And here lies the paradox of resilience. The world tells her resilience means never breaking, never faltering, always smiling. But the deeper truth is that resilience is born in the breaking. Resilience is not pretending the grief isn't there. It is allowing the grief to move through, to soften the heart instead of hardening it. It is the courage to be undone, and in that undoing to discover a strength that was never about performance but about presence. The smile will return one day, but it will no longer conceal. It will not be the practiced grin of survival, but the authentic expression of a woman who has faced her grief and lived to tell the story. That smile will not hide the truth, it will embody it. Because resilience is not the absence of sorrow. It is the integration of sorrow into a deeper, wiser self. Still, a question lingers like a shadow at the edge of this realization. If the body holds the grief, how does she begin to let it go? What path could possibly lead her from the tightness of survival into the spaciousness of healing? The path begins where most women least want to go, into the silence they have avoided. Silence can feel unbearable for someone whose nervous system has lived in constant vigilance. The moment the noise stops, the body begins to speak and the voice of grief rises. That is why distraction becomes a habit. Endless scrolling, relentless productivity, constant caretaking of others. These are not signs of weakness, but strategies of survival. Yet they also prevent her from hearing the truth, waiting in her own body. In the silence, old images resurface. The memory of a mother's absence when comfort was needed. The echo of words spoken in anger that left her small and trembling. The sharp, invisible fracture of trust when someone she loved turned away. These images carry sensations, tightness in the throat, a pit in the stomach, a weight pressing against the chest. She may not even remember the events fully, but her body does. And in that remembering, the nervous system offers her the invitation she has long resisted. Feel it now, so you no longer have to carry it alone. This confrontation is not easy. Jung wrote that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To face grief is to walk willingly into the darkness within, to sit with the part of herself that still trembles, still waits for comfort, still feels abandoned. She must meet the child she once was, the one who first learned to hide behind a smile because no one could bear her tears. Here the archetype of the inner child awakens. She is not weak or foolish. She is the keeper of the original wound, the guardian of authenticity. The inner child does not care for appearances or resilience as performance. She only cares for truth, and she refuses to be silenced forever. Every tightening of the chest, every restless night, every surge of anxiety is her way of tugging on the sleeve of the adult self, begging to be seen. To see this child is to begin the real work. Not to fix her, not to silence her, but to witness her pain with compassion. Imagine her sitting in a dimly lit room, hands wrapped around her knees, eyes wide with unshed tears. For years she has waited in that shadowed corner, believing no one would come, and now at last she is found. The adult self kneels before her, not with judgment but with tenderness. "I see you," she whispers. "I hear you. You don't have to pretend anymore." This moment of recognition is both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it exposes the rawness of grief long denied. Liberating because it begins to untangle the false belief that she must hide her pain to be loved. The nervous system softens in this recognition. Shoulders release their grip, breath sinks deeper, tears flow. The body begins to remember what it feels like to be safe enough to feel. But safety is not a single moment, it is a practice. Healing the nervous system is not about forcing joy or demanding peace. It is about creating spaces where the body can slowly learn it is no longer in danger. A warm bath, a steady breath, a gentle hand pressed to the heart. These small rituals may seem insignificant, but they are sacred. They tell the nervous system, "You are safe now. You can rest." Still, the shadows resist. The old beliefs whisper, "You're weak for crying, you're selfish for needing, you're too much, not enough, unworthy." These are the echoes of conditioning, the voices of those who once silenced her. To move forward, she must confront these voices and see them for what they are, not truths, but scars. The resilience she seeks is not in denying these shadows, but in facing them and choosing not to let them rule her life. Perhaps you feel this resistance in yourself too. The way you flinch when your own tears rise. The way you dismiss your longing for comfort as childish. The way you smile when your body aches to be held. This is the crossroads where healing either deepens or stalls. To continue pretending is to keep the nervous system trapped in a loop of survival. To face the grief is to break the loop and reclaim the possibility of wholeness. And this reclamation is more than personal, it is archetypal. Across generations, women have been told to conceal their pain, to be pillars of strength for others while neglecting themselves. Their nervous systems, too, carried the weight of unspoken grief. To heal now is not only to free herself, but to break a cycle handed down through mothers and grandmothers who also smiled while they ached. Healing becomes an act of defiance, a declaration that the feminine will no longer carry sorrow in silence. Yet this act of defiance does not roar, it whispers. It is the quiet courage to place a hand on her heart and breathe through the tightness. The bravery to let tears fall even if no one else understands. The strength to say, "I hurt," without apology. From these small acts, a new kind of resilience emerges, not the brittle resilience of performance, but the supple resilience of truth. But the question remains, when the grief is finally faced, when the tears are finally shed, what comes after? What is born in the space where sorrow once lived? What new self waits beyond the silence? What waits beyond grief is not the woman she once was. She cannot return to the version of herself that first put on the mask of resilience, because that version was born of necessity. The girl who smiled to survive, the woman who performed strength to be accepted, those selves carried her far, but they were never meant to be her final form. Healing grief is not about going back. It is about becoming someone new, someone who no longer needs the mask because truth itself has become her anchor. At first, this newness feels disorienting. When the nervous system has been shaped by sorrow for so long, peace can feel foreign. The body waits for the other shoe to drop, for danger to return. Even joy can feel suspicious, as though it cannot be trusted to last. This is the paradox of healing. The very safety she longs for can feel unsafe at first. Her chest may still tighten. Her shoulders may still brace, not because the wound is unhealed, but because the nervous system is learning what it means to live without constant threat. This is where patience becomes the deepest form of resilience. Healing is not linear. It spirals, circling back through old memories, old sensations, old triggers. There will be days when grief feels distant and days when it floods her again. The measure of progress is not the absence of pain, but the capacity to remain present with it. The woman she is becoming does not silence her body's truths. She listens. She breathes. She allows. And each time she chooses presence over suppression, her nervous system relearns safety. The archetype of the mother emerges here, not only as caretaker of children but as nurturer of the self. She learns to mother her own nervous system, to create rituals of safety the way a mother soothes an infant. A gentle voice spoken inward, a steady hand on her own back, the willingness to pause, to rest, to honor the rhythms of her body. This is resilience transformed, not the stoic denial of need, but the sacred acceptance of it. And as she nurtures herself, the energy of grief begins to alchemize. The tears that once felt like drowning become rivers that cleanse. The heaviness in her chest becomes space for breath. The trembling in her hands becomes a reminder of life still moving through her. Slowly, she begins to feel moments of joy not as intrusions but as companions. A bird's song in the morning, the warmth of tea in her hands, the laughter that rises unexpectedly and feels genuine, unforced. These small joys are not a distraction from grief, but the evidence that grief has been honored enough to make space for them. But the transformation does not stop at the personal level. Grief, once faced, becomes a bridge of empathy. The woman who has listened to her own nervous system can now hear the unspoken truths in others. She recognizes the smile that hides sorrow, the posture that conceals fear, the polite words that mask exhaustion. She knows because she has lived it, and instead of judging, she offers presence. This is how resilience ripples outward. It becomes medicine for the collective, not just survival for the self. Still, there is a danger here. The danger of slipping back into old roles, of using her healing not as freedom but as proof of worth. The temptation to be the strong one for everyone else again, to carry their grief while neglecting her own. This is where the archetype of the wise woman must rise. She knows that true resilience is not endless giving, but balanced being. She knows that her worth is not tied to how much she endures for others, but how deeply she lives in her own truth. Perhaps you too have felt this temptation, to return to old patterns because they are familiar, even if they suffocate you. To wear the smile again because it feels easier than explaining your sorrow. To carry the weight for others because it feels noble even as it crushes you. But healing asks more of you. It asks that you choose authenticity over performance, even when it feels uncomfortable. It asks that you claim your life not as survival, but as sacred ground. The smile, once a shield, begins to change meaning here. It is no longer the mask of silence, but the sign of integration. A genuine smile rises not from denial, but from embodiment. It carries both grief and resilience, both shadow and light. When she smiles now, it is because she knows the depth of her sorrow and the strength of her survival. It is the smile of a woman who has walked through the fire and emerged with ashes in her hair, but light in her eyes. And yet, there remains a final question, one that presses at the heart of this transformation. What is she meant to do with this new resilience? If grief has been alchemized, if the nervous system has learned safety, what is the larger purpose of her healing? What gift does this new self carry into the world? The larger purpose reveals itself slowly, like dawn spreading across the horizon. At first, it is subtle, a softening in the way she speaks to herself, a gentleness in the way she moves through the day. She no longer pushes her body past exhaustion to prove her worth. She no longer apologizes for needing rest, for needing space, for needing love. These choices may appear small to others, but to her they are revolutionary. Each one is a declaration. I am no longer ruled by the wound. This reclamation shifts her relationships as well. Where once she would have tolerated neglect or betrayal in silence, she now hears the protest in her own nervous system and honors it. When her chest tightens in the presence of disrespect, she does not smile it away. She listens. She speaks. She sets boundaries not as walls but as guardians of her dignity. Resilience here is not about enduring mistreatment, it is about refusing to shrink for the comfort of others. In this way, grief becomes her teacher, shaping her into a woman who no longer mistakes suppression for strength. The tears she once buried taught her how to honor emotion. The silence she once carried taught her the value of voice. The trembling of her nervous system taught her that the body's wisdom is the most trustworthy guide she has. What once felt like weakness now becomes the foundation of her power. And that power is not loud or domineering. It is steady, unshakable, like roots deep in the earth. She does not need to prove her resilience anymore because it radiates through her very being. Others sense it when she enters a room, the calm presence, the authenticity in her eyes, the way she does not flinch from truth. This is the feminine in her fullness, both tender and fierce, both vulnerable and strong. But this fullness did not come without cost. To arrive here, she had to face the grief her smile concealed. She had to let her nervous system tell its story without interruption. She had to sit in silence, endure discomfort, and allow the shadows of her past to emerge. This path is not for the faint of heart, yet it is precisely in walking it that she discovered the heart she once doubted she had. The Jungian process of individuation describes this journey well. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. Wholeness includes grief as much as joy, shadow as much as light. The woman who has faced her sorrow is no longer fragmented. She carries her wounds as part of her story, not as chains around her spirit. She embodies the paradox that true resilience is born not from avoidance, but from integration. And perhaps this is the gift she carries into the world. Not a doctrine, not a performance, but an embodied presence. When she sits with another who hides their pain behind a smile, she does not rush to fix them. She simply sees them as she once longed to be seen. When she encounters someone drowning in silence, she does not turn away. She knows the language of the body, the tremors and the sighs, and she honors them. Her very being becomes an invitation. You do not have to hide. You are safe to be real. This is how grief transforms into resilience, and resilience into service. Not service that drains her, but service that flows from her fullness. She no longer betrays herself to hold others. Instead, she stands rooted in her truth, and from that ground she offers presence. And presence is more healing than any performance of strength. Perhaps you have felt this calling in yourself, a sense that your own pain, once faced, could become a lantern for others. Not by erasing your scars, but by allowing them to shine as proof that healing is possible. Perhaps you are beginning to see that your nervous system, far from betraying you, has always been guiding you home. The tight chest, the restless nights, the trembling hands, they were never weakness. They were signals asking you to return to yourself. And so the smile changes one final time. It is no longer the mask of survival, nor merely the sign of personal healing. It becomes a symbol of transmission, the quiet power of a woman who has walked through grief and discovered her resilience on the other side. Her smile no longer conceals. It reveals. It tells the truth her body always knew, that within every wound lies the seed of rebirth. But here, at the edge of transformation, one last question waits, shimmering like a threshold. If the nervous system has been the storyteller of her grief, can it also become the storyteller of her joy? Can the body that once trembled in silence now become the vessel through which life itself is fully celebrated? The body can indeed become the vessel of celebration, but only after grief has been given its rightful place. Joy that is forced rings hollow, just as a smile that conceals sorrow leaves a hollow ache behind the lips. But when grief is honored, joy returns naturally, like spring after winter. The nervous system that once braced against loss begins to soften into receptivity. The shoulders that once carried invisible weights begin to relax, allowing breath to flow more freely. The heart, once armored, begins to beat with trust again. At first, this joy is fragile. A small moment of laughter might be followed by tears. A sense of peace may dissolve suddenly into restlessness. This is not regression, it is integration. The nervous system is learning a new rhythm, weaving grief and joy into the same tapestry instead of splitting them apart. She realizes she does not need to erase her sorrow to feel alive. She only needs to allow space for both. This is the deepest secret resilience offers. Not the promise that life will be free of pain, but the assurance that pain no longer defines the whole story. Resilience is not a shield against suffering. It is the capacity to remain open even when suffering comes. To keep the heart tender, the body awake, the spirit unbroken. This is not the brittle strength of survival, but the supple strength of presence. The lover archetype stirs here. She who once feared intimacy now learns to trust it. The nervous system that once braced against abandonment begins to lean into connection. She no longer hides behind a smile in relationships, but lets her truth be known. If her chest tightens, she speaks it. If her body trembles, she does not conceal it. Vulnerability becomes her new form of intimacy, and in it, she discovers a love more real than any mask could ever attract. And through this vulnerability, joy deepens, because joy without authenticity is fragile, easily shattered. But joy rooted in truth can withstand the storms. She learns to laugh not because everything is perfect, but because she has faced imperfection and chosen life anyway. She learns to love not because she fears losing, but because she knows loss and still dares to open. This is the resilience of the feminine soul, to grieve deeply and yet remain capable of joy. Perhaps you can sense this possibility stirring in yourself. The idea that your body, once a container of sorrow, could also be a vessel of celebration. That the same nervous system that once trembled in fear could tremble in ecstasy. That the same heart that once broke could now expand with love. It is not naive. It is not denial. It is the alchemy of grief into resilience, resilience into joy. This joy is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, like the peace of waking up without dread. Sometimes it is subtle, like the warmth of sun on skin or the comfort of silence shared with someone you trust. Other times it is fierce, like laughter that shakes the body or dancing without restraint. Whatever form it takes, it carries authenticity. It is no longer performance. It is presence. And as this joy unfolds, she realizes her nervous system has become her ally. The same signals that once overwhelmed her now guide her. A tightening in her chest is no longer a mystery. It is a reminder to slow down, to listen, to care for herself. A rush of warmth in her heart is no longer dismissed. It is a signal of connection, of safety, of life blooming within. The body she once saw as betraying her becomes the compass that leads her into deeper truth. This is the final stage of transformation, embodiment. No longer split between a smiling mask and a grieving body, she lives as one whole being. The nervous system tells the truth and she listens. The smile reflects the truth and she allows it. Resilience no longer means concealing sorrow or performing strength. It means inhabiting her body fully, with all its scars and all its beauty. And perhaps this is the prophecy her journey has been leading toward. One day she will look back and see that her nervous system was never her enemy. It was her greatest ally, insisting on truth when her mind wanted to deny it, guiding her back to authenticity even when it hurt. She will see that the grief she once feared was the doorway to her deepest resilience, and that resilience became the foundation of her joy. The final question, the one that echoes as her story closes, is not whether she will smile again, because she will. It is whether that smile will carry the weight of concealment or the freedom of truth. And if you are listening closely, you already know the answer, because the body never lies.